Tom Steyer, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Steyer is running for California governor. Let me turn this off real quick as well. And we're very excited to have you here. I had a lieutenant governor candidate early on, but I haven't had. This is the first.
Which one?
Ma, not
Fiona Ma.
No, not Fiona Ma. No, Alan Ma.
Okay.
He's the socialist running. Or no, Alan Ma. Sorry, Oliver Ma. I messed up his name. I apologize. Okay, thank you, Austin Ox. So we got a lot of questions for you that are lined up, obviously, but
these are all being sent in by your.
No. I set it up ahead of time, but
okay.
But I'm sure chat also has a lot of questions as well. But you probably should not read chat. I mean, you won't be able to anyway. It's going a mile a minute. But first and foremost, this is a question that I ask every single candidate that sits next to me on the broadcast, which is the Zoran method. What are your five top line policy positions that you want to be defined by?
So I'm running on two things, and I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to put it in a little bit of context.
You're very good at politics already.
Affordability. Mm-hmm. And also I feel like there's a straightforward struggle in this election that is the subtext to every policy decision, which is a struggle between working people and what are some would call them the corporate special interest. They're clearly becoming oligarchs, as is a word that I know people have used on your show. But clearly there's a struggle between the corporate interests that are trying to control our state and have controlled our state successfully, and working people who've gotten the shaft for 45 years. Mm-hmm. So those are the two overarching issues. And that, I think, subsumes policy, but I'll give you the policies. I mean, number one is housing, to bring down housing costs. And that's also got a multiple, that is not a simple thing to do. I always say to people, it's not a silver bullet, it's silver buckshot. There are multiple things that have to happen for us to build a lot of housing and bring down housing costs. But that's number one, because that's the thing that's most crushing people on a monthly basis. Number two, and this is not in order of importance, but number two is to introduce competition to the electric monopolies that dominate this state. We pay twice as much for electricity. It's important to every family in this state, except the ones that are in municipal utilities, of which there are three big ones. But it's also a symbol that monopolies are allowed to rule us, and that no one's ever supposed to say anything. And in fact, that they will beat you up if you try to say something, which I am clearly saying, and which I think is long overdue. Number three, I'm for single-payer healthcare. And I'm for single-payer healthcare because I've looked at the numbers, I've studied where we're going, I've studied what's causing every family in this state to suffer the healthcare inflation that's been going on for 40 years, like clockwork, and that is eating every family, it's eating every business, it's eating every nonprofit, and it's eating the state of California itself. So that's number three. Number four, we have an amazingly weird tax structure in this state. And I have gone to the ballot box 3 times to take on huge funded corporate interests to close their loopholes. And that's the oil companies, the tobacco companies, and out-of-state companies that were gaming our state income tax. Number 4 in your list, since you're asking for 5, is to close the corporate real estate tax loophole that's been there for over 40 years, that's worth $22 billion. It's, the thing is, there's no logic for it. It just is.
What is the loophole? How does it work?
Basically, how it works is this. In 1978, as part of Prop 13, they were given a valuation of their properties that escalates very slowly, 2% a year. Those properties have escalated at multiples of that. They are worth multiples of what they're paying taxes on. But the original point of Prop 13 was to protect families from being thrown out of their houses, because as the housing prices and values escalated, they couldn't afford to pay their real estate taxes on their houses, which they'd paid a fraction of in the first place. So the idea was for them to protect Granny from getting thrown out of her house. Mm-hmm. But of course, the lobbyists put in commercial office buildings and malls. And there's no reason for that. Nobody's worried about Granny getting thrown out of the office building she owns or the mall she owns.
Yeah.
And undoing that and having them pay real estate taxes based on realistic values, current values, is worth $22 billion a year to the people of California. There's no reason not to do it. There's no reason that this happened in the first place. So that's number 4. And number 5, I mean, these are not the only things I'm talking about, but number 5 is we got to be a top 10 school in state in education. I'm sorry, we aren't. There's big reasons for it, but how can we call ourselves a successful state in the 21st century if we're not educating our children? How is that possible?
What are your solutions for education, and do they revolve around charter schools, or is it more so about restructuring the way that public funding goes to public institutions?
It's 100% about public institutions.
Okay.
Let me say 90% of the kids in the state of California go to public school. If we're going to actually improve education in the state of California, we have to do it through the public schools. We have to do it in conjunction with the teachers who actually run those classrooms. And everybody thinks that we spend so much on public schools. The truth is, cost adjusted, we pay 31st out of 50 per pupil in the United States of America. Everyone thinks we spend so much. The costs are so high. What we're delivering is 31st out of 50. So when I talk about closing a corporate tax loophole for $22 billion, a little less than half of that's going to go to education. There's a money problem. Yes, can we do a better job? But am I one of those people who's coming in here to say, based on my 0 years as a professional educator, I believe I should be telling you guys how to educate? No.
So let's get back to healthcare. One of the main things that you brought up, you're saying that you're in favor of single payer healthcare, which obviously I'm also in favor of. I think it doesn't go far enough. I'm in favor of a nationalized healthcare system, but I'm perfectly fine with moving in that direction through an expansion of social safety nets such as Medicare for all and a single payer system. You ran for president in 2020. And when you ran for president in 2020, there was Bernie Sanders, who was also running, and he was running on a single payer. And you actually came out with ads against single payer, saying that this was a system that you had looked into deeply and that you thought it had not worked. What changed in your analysis
To make me change my mind.
to help you change your mind?
The facts. So you should know, Hasan, I went to Stanford Business School, and they made this argument consistently, which I believed that basically capitalism and corporations were the way to drive down costs. No. And I want to make a distinction here. And I looked at what was going on in healthcare, and I looked at it over time, and I looked to see if that had happened one time. And, when I was looking at it in 19, and I was talking to all these people who were bringing IT into the system and saying, this is going to flatten the curve, this is going to drop costs, blah, blah, blah. Nope, absolutely not true. So I said, look, this is something that is eating this state. I have to look at the facts honestly, and if I was wrong, I have to say so. And I was wrong. And what made me change my mind was looking at the facts and saying, this was the prediction of what was happening, absolute BS. So, okay, that didn't work. We absolutely have to. And let me get into why I think this is true and why I was wrong. There are certain things for which capitalism is very effective. So if you and I are competing to provide the best cell phone, okay, so we're each trying to put in the most features and get the price the lowest so we can sell the most cell phones. Okay. And if you look and see that in those kinds of products, private companies come in with new apps and it's very effective. But when private companies have one customer, so if the electric monopolies have one customer, or if the healthcare system has one customer, then the capitalist impulse and the incentive is to drive the cost up as much as possible and drive the quality of care or the quality of electric, generation as low as possible. And I looked and I said, this is 7% inflation for as far as the eye can see. We can't afford it. It will bankrupt us. We need to do a different system, period. And I was wrong.
Are you familiar with Deng Xiaoping?
I certainly am.
Yeah, because it kind of feels like your attitude around it is. I mean, he was approaching it from the exact opposite.
He
from
exactly
the
was.
exact opposite side of the equation. But some of the reforms implemented that worked in favor of what we've seen in China as far as Chinese prosperity goes happened for that reason. In the United States of America, we have a complete neoliberal system that is collapsing in and of itself with no viable alternative. And I would say that is part of the reason why there is not really a lot of market competition, as you put it. I think all industries inevitably want to monopolize. It makes sense.
Of course they do.
And it's up to
but
the
there's
state.
somewhere structurally it really happens.
It's up to the state to try to hold back that urge to the best of their ability. And it's clear that we are completely captive to corporate interests in this country, as is intended by my assessment, at least, of what is supposed to happen in a capitalist state, or at least under neoliberalism. That's certainly what's happened. You're saying that in the field of healthcare, this simply doesn't work, and the results speak for themselves. America has some of the worst healthcare outcomes out of any OECD nation, and
we pay twice as much.
Yeah, and we pay
That
the
seems
most
like-
amount of money. Now that helps the GDP, even though that's an unreliable metric to understand the overall health of an economy and certainly overall health of the population. I think that there are a lot of other industries where this exists, mostly, industries that are natural, like have a naturally high barrier of entry, like airlines, industries such as, the public utilities. And there have been very successful examples in places like Tennessee, for example, Tennessee Valley Authority, that have taken over the public utilities and have done a much better job of serving the population.
Well, for example, I don't know which electric company delivers your electricity. Is it LADWP?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, just so you know, that's a municipal utility. The costs to its customers are less than half of the electric monopolies around the state.
Yeah.
Just so you know, less than half. And the other two big ones, Sacramento's the same. So
you got PG&E.
well, the three big ones are SoCal Edison, San Diego Gas and Electric, and Pacific Gas and Electric.
Yeah. What is your? How do you intend to break the oligopoly structure that exists in the municipalities as a governor?
In terms of the electricity,
Yeah.
electric. So, in my mind, I'm going to do two things because there's a short-term thing I can do and there's a longer thing I can do. And that's true of a lot of these problems, including healthcare. Delivering money to the healthcare system to meet a current shortfall is necessary, but longer term, we need structural change. In terms of electricity, in the short run, we need to change the incentives that the PUC, that the Public Utilities Commission puts on these electric monopolies. And we can do that because the governor gets to pick the PUC, and therefore who you choose is policy. And we need, the policy incentives for an electric utility are very weird. And Hasan, I don't know how much, and how much depth you've gone into this. So I don't want to be, but
I'm not super familiar, but it's okay. I'm here to learn.
okay. So basically everyone thinks that the way they work is like a company where, you charge people for electricity, you spend your costs, and the difference is your income. That is not how it works. The way that it works is you make a capital expenditure. It's approved by the Public Utilities Commission. It goes into a rate base and you get a guaranteed return on it. That's how it works.
So the state's footing the bill
For everything.
for everything. Well,
And so your incentive is if the two of us are running an electric monopoly and we say, look, we could do this for $100 million, or we could do this for $200 million. Now, if we do it for $100 million and we get a 10% guaranteed return, that would be $1 million. But if we do $10 million, but if we do a $200 million, we'll make $20 million.
Yeah.
Now, which do you think we should do, boys?
corporate consolidation yields. It makes it much easier to engage in not price fixing, of course.
But
which
this
would
is
be
really
illegal,
literally
but
how it works.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is an aspect of like virtually every facet of existence in America at this point. As as we have a cartel structure pretty much for everything.
For many.
Yes.
But let me say this. In this case, just to give you some more numbers, to generate electricity right now in solar and wind is between 1 and 2 cents a kilowatt hour. Just it's 1 to 2 is all that really matters.
Mm-hmm.
To stick it in a battery and store it is a couple more cents. At PG&E, it's 48 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that. If you put solar on your roof and battery, the vast majority of the electricity that you're going to use is actually being produced for under 4 cents, and you're paying more than 10 times that. So the question is, isn't there a way to introduce competition? And there is at a local level to take advantage of the incredible changes and advances in electricity generation, electricity storage, and electricity distribution, and introduce that competition to the state so that it's no longer illegal to compete on a local basis.
I mean, hey, look, there's an alternative there too. I mean, I don't have a problem with state-run monopolies at all, as long as they're left accountable to the people. That's the reason why I use the example of Tennessee Valley Authority. So a question I have for you is, how are you going to be different than our current governor, Gavin Newsom? You've brought up a couple examples, but there's one that I obviously have to ask you. Since you're a billionaire yourself, there's a wealth tax, or there's a billionaire's tax that's being talked about right now. Governor Gavin Newsom, because of his ambitions for higher office, has decided that the successful strategy of maybe one day becoming president is to go against that. And he's actively petitioning against that. What is your assessment on the billionaire's tax?
So let me start by saying I'm in favor of a different tax structure where billionaires pay more money. And I'm not equivocal about that. Absolutely. I started by saying we have a tax structure that makes no sense. And in fact, I'm specifically in favor of one where the big corporations and the richest people pay more. Full stop. The billionaire's tax that specifically people are collecting signatures for, in my mind, has some specific issues with it. And where I feel like if we're going to redo the tax structure, we should do it right because we're going to own it for a long time. This is a one-time fix.
What are your issues with the billionaire's tax as it stands?
This is a one-time fix. It's not, when I'm talking about closing the corporate real estate tax loophole, that's every year. That goes on. It raises more money and it goes on forever, and it's there. This is a one-time tax.
Why not both?
Well, let me keep going back because there's a way to do this tax that is different. And the second thing that's true about this tax is, I don't know if you've looked at how it distributes the money, but it distributes the money in a way that is, well, I'll say, doesn't include in a meaningful way education, doesn't include a lot of the other priorities in this state.
Where is it going in the distribution that you have an issue with?
90% of it goes explicitly to healthcare. And the point is, do we need the money in healthcare? Yes. Do we need the money everywhere else? Yes. And so to a very large extent, what I'm saying is, if it's a question about revenues, which I agree with because we do have a shortfall and we should have this tilted in this way.
So you're saying you want to tax billionaires further than this tax goes and distribute it?
I'm saying I want to do it in a way that works for the state. And the concept I'm behind, but the way this works, it seems to me, has actual structural issues that we can do much better. And so if we're going to redo the tax structure, which we are, I mean, I'm starting with talking about closing this tax loophole, but we're going to have to I don't know how closely you followed, Hasan, the way our taxes work, but it's very much a yo-yo. When times are good, we take in a ton of taxes. When times are bad, we take in no taxes. And so we go from feast to famine.
Well, a big part of that is because I think a lot of people park their assets in the stock market, and therefore most of that is non-taxable, like unless they take it out. And many billionaires and millionaires as well take advantage of the buy, borrow, die strategy, where they just leverage the existing assets that they have at a bank at a super favorable interest rate.
Unquestionably true. And so there are a lot, if you look at what they actually pay, what you see is there are
a fraction of their yearly
completely legal ways for them to avoid paying taxes. And so that and then it's not just, borrow, buy, borrow, die. It's also buy, borrow, leave.
Yeah. Well, there's solutions to that, like an exit tax. But question for you is some of the repercussions that have been presented over and over again, which is basic econ, I think, which is a lie, is that this will cause,
A big exodus.
this will cause the wealth to leave the state. I don't believe that. You're a billionaire. You know other billionaires. This is a conversation I'm sure that takes place all the time, but it never actually ends up happening.
Famously, some people have left as a result of the threat of this tax. But let me say this: I don't think that's the point, Hasan. I am actually on your side on this.
Well, the individuals leave, but
the company,
but the economic activity doesn't go away.
My point about this is the best place to start a company. This is the best place to grow a company. This is the best place to invent a company. And that is really important to the state of California. And so to a very large extent, I am, as you are suggesting, I am truly focused on making sure that continues to be true. And I feel as if the people who come here from overseas or from other states to take advantage of that ecosystem, which has taken decades to build, which has been built by working people all over this state who continue to make this state run, and to come here and rip that off and try and avoid any responsibility to the 40 million other people in this state is completely wrong. And it's wrong, and it shouldn't be. We should be protecting ourselves against that.
So what's your perspective on? I mean, what's your solution to it? Is what I mean, because people will say that a wealth tax could never work, right? A wealth tax is impossible to work out, when in fact we already have something similar to that as far as like property taxes goes. Like there's always, there are people that can evaluate your increase in your net worth and try to tax the increase in your net worth year over year in a way that is sustainable, in a way that doesn't actually harm the producers.
So let me say a couple things about taxes. Mm-hmm. Closing loopholes seems pretty benign, but that will have to go to the ballot. I've said we'll have a special election. And let me say this: before we write the rules for that, we will sit down with a whole bunch of our allies to make sure that it reflects everybody's interest. And so I am sure that we have other ideas that people haven't talked about as part of this campaign in terms of how to redo the way that we have, the kind of fees and taxes we charge. One of the things I really want to do, Hasan, is do that. You can't pass any of these things just because you're the governor. And I think it's really important in doing this, one of my favorite expressions: if you want me in at the landing, ask me in at the takeoff. That in fact, before we put something out, that we go to all the people who we view as the coalition that is pushing the interests of working people in this state, the interests of justice in this state, to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
I think part of the reason why there's a broad popular support for this ballot initiative in the form of billionaires' taxes, regardless of whether it's the most efficient way to tax billionaires or not, is because people just don't care. People are like,
I agree.
don't care.
It's anger. People are, look, and they're absolutely right. What we have seen is a group of people who come across as reckless, selfish, incredibly ambitious, and anti-democratic across the board. And so, of course, people are furious. And of course, people are furious that they have what seems to be, and actually seems to be, almost limitless wealth, which they're absolutely interested in preserving 100% of. And people feel like, yeah, they're angry, and they're right to be angry. It's absolutely right. And that's what's going on. I mean, when you had people on here talking about the oligarchs, if you see what's going on in this election, there is as much as there's what you're describing as the anger of working people at a system that seems rigged and unfair, with people who are extremely selfish and extremely obnoxious, trying to have their way. And on the other side, people are absolutely furious about what they feel is unfair, and they are going to push for all the things that I just said people are seeing to a further degree, to a much greater degree. And that's what's going on in this election. So of course people are mad.
I mean, yes, I understand. But of course, the obvious elephant in the room is the fact that you are also a part of the oligarch class. As someone with profound wealth,
Can I address that?
Yes.
So I want to say two things. The first thing I want to say is this. My wife and I have said we'll give the bulk of our money away while we're alive. I guarantee I won't be close to a billionaire when I die. This is not something where I'm fighting to hang on to my money. This is not something where I'm fighting to increase my money or increase my control over society. That's not true. You can see the last 14 years of my life, and we've very, very consistently pushed for justice and very, very consistently given money away and tried to use it in a ways that's constructive. And, the opposite. In fact, the actual oligarchs, you will find, see me as a threat. And in fact, the things that I've done have been very directly result-oriented to push back against that whole move. So, from my standpoint, and, that is not what I stand for in my life. That's not what I care about in life. That's not what my parents cared about. That's not what my wife cares about. That's not what my brother cares about. We have a long history of caring about what is your positive impact on society. And that's what I care about. Mm-hmm. And that is different from all the people who you see in the press consistently doing things where people are furious about their selfishness.
Yeah. There are ways in which a lot of super wealthy people also engage in charitable contributions. One of the most common ways in which people do this is like the 501c4 structure or the 501c3 structure, where Mark Zuckerberg he has designed his entire net worth to go into the structure, and it's oftentimes seen as like a tax shelter that you can go to at any given point and take out money from, and continue to generate tremendous amounts of wealth, continue to accumulate tremendous amounts of wealth. What is the difference that you would say is with your approach to charitable contributions?
Well, I'll give you an example of something that we've done for the last 20 years, Hasan. Mm-hmm. So Kat and I started a nonprofit community bank basically to undo redlining. So to go into the parts of rural and urban California and make loans for low-income housing, for used cars, for nonprofits, and for businesses that banks wouldn't make. And that money is gone. That bank has to make enough money so the FDIC will insure our deposits, or it's not a bank. Mm-hmm. But every single loan is measured in terms of, does it help economic justice? Does it help environmental justice? And so from my standpoint, that's not I get them, you're saying, you can put it in and it comes back. This can never come back. That bank has made billions of dollars of loans for the purposes I described. As an example, when we do used car loans are one of the places where people get ripped off the most, just so you know. It's usually people who aren't that financially sophisticated, who need a ride to work, and who have a used car salesman writing the terms of that loan. The average loan we rewrite is 21%. Our average starting point is 11, and it goes down from there if you meet your payments. And our whole goal is to make enough money, just enough money to please the FDIC, but to basically take people out of being ripped off by the system and basically to undo the structural racism that's existed in the finance system for as long as anyone can remember. And so there's no gimmick there. That money's gone, but the work is incredibly, I look at it and I say to everybody, you get 10 times leverage on your money, and then you get to reuse it and do it again. And you can measure the results year in, year out. That's not a gimmick. That's a thing.
No, it's not. But to me, it kind of feels as though as society has moved in a specific direction. I mean, let's talk about that actually. 23% or 33% of Democrats now call themselves Democratic Socialists.
Is that right? It's up to 33?
Yes, 33%.
Is that just California or is that nationwide?
No. That's nationwide from what I understand. I mean, These polls are...
I know.
Who knows?
It's okay, it's a poll. And it's still a really high number.
Who knows if people even fully understand what that even means? There's a lot of... there's a lot of disagreements within the movement as well. But the reason why I ask that is because... what does that say to you? What does that say to you living in the United States of America as a billionaire about the way people feel about the current system, capitalism?
It's failed. Look, I don't think there's any question, Hasan, and I say this every day. We have to reinvent democracy in this country, and we have to reinvent capitalism. And there's no doubt about it, because 33% of Democrats are saying we need to change structurally. that structurally this is not working. And that is, I don't know what democratic social. One of the things I thought about before I came on here was for you to tell me exactly what the implications that are. But there's no doubt about the basic point, which is not working. And I think if you think about why is the billionaire tax popular? Because people are so damn mad. Of course they're mad. And if you look at the popularity of the two parties, it's incredibly low.
Are you familiar with stakeholder capitalism and numerous other initiatives that were implemented in the early stages of like post 2016 election, where a lot of wealthy people were like, the pickaxes are out, people are going to riot. We need to find a reasonable solution to this problem.
Okay, so let me say this. We have seen in the last 14 months a pretty straightforward attack on human rights in America and on sort of electoral politics, electoral democracy in America, and it's just starting. And what we've also seen at the same time is complete silence from this community. So when you say to me, do I think that what they have to say is based on a deep sense of patriotism or a broader view or a value system that goes beyond, corporate? I don't think so.
No, I don't think it was a deep sense of patriotism. The reason why I brought that up is because I think it was a defense mechanism by a bunch of very smart and very successful, very wealthy people that realized that this system was producing so much inequality that it would completely collapse, and that in order for it not to completely collapse, like a riot tax of sorts, something that I've heard at least like wealthy libertarians talk
really,
about.
They call it a riot tax? I've never heard that.
Wealthy libertarians call welfare a riot tax. And it expands beyond that, obviously, but like basically the system is on the verge of collapse in its entirety, so we have to figure out a way to do a more ethical version of capitalism. But I don't think capitalism in and of itself, given the contradictions, is ever going to produce a wealthier or a more egalitarian version of itself. That's just not how it works. Just as companies want to monopolize and eat out the rest of the competition and merge, the understanding is that the system is designed this way, and that eventually, no matter what happens, as long as in the absence of complete abolition, that there is always going to be a return to the exact same inequalities. I believe that, and I think that's the major difference between someone who's a socialist and someone who's a capitalist. There are people who are social democrats. I suspect that, given by what you're saying, you are a social democrat, one that wants, robust safety nets, robust social safety nets, one that believes in implementing some kind of regulatory safeguard when companies get completely out of control. But that was how this system was designed initially. And there's a reason why there's a point of failure, and that's because of it's not because of like too much greed necessarily, but it's more so that the system is designed to produce these results eventually because they've taken over the government.
Well, the last thing that you said is the problem. I mean, when I look at this system and whenever I see that there's something, I mean, if I did close these 3 tax loopholes, they weren't a secret. It wasn't like everybody didn't know those tax loopholes agreed. It was just the people who were getting the tax, who were saving the taxes and were enjoying the loophole, had immense power because they had a lot of money and a lot of lobbyists. And every time when we see an inability of government to act, an inability to do what's right, my attitude is there's money at the bottom of it. And so we have a system where, honestly, a lot of this, when I look at 2026 and see what I think is going to happen, which I think is gigantic independent expenditures supporting libertarian candidates and attacking organized labor, I'm like, yeah, that is exactly the issue in this system is when corporations take over the government and prevent government doing the right thing and prevent government from, stopping monopolies and prevent regulation and, basically beat working people over and over again. And that is exactly what I'm fighting against.
Yeah. While we were talking, a new poll came out that says, which is a better economic system amongst all Americans, with 59% saying capitalism, 41% saying socialism. Among Republicans, 74% say capitalism, 26% say socialism, which is strange enough.
It's in and of itself.
And among Democrats, the majority at 54% say socialism and 46% say capitalism. So
then tell me this, Hasan.
you're running out of time with this ethical capitalism.
Well, let me
thing.
ask you this question: what is socialism? So, what does it look like?
Socialism is an economic organization that changes changes the mechanism of control, simply put, from the hands of the dictatorship of the capital owning class to the dictatorship of the proletariat. There's many different versions of it. There's decentralized versions of it. There's centralized versions of it.
Give me an example of one.
I mean,
like which is one?
China would be a transitional socialist state, for example. That's like a very that is one of the modern examples of at least success. The capital flows are still completely controlled in the hands of the state, and that while as we referenced Deng Xiaoping, there's like different reforms that have been implemented in the past. The way that the state currently operates is they design a 5-year plan. They have a specific industrial targets that they want to hit. And the goal there is not like redistributive policies or like a robust welfare state at all, but instead is to improve the material conditions of the working class. And the state dishes out, by controlling the bank system, controlling capital flows, dishes out money in the direction of certain industrial output targets. And,
but still has
control
tons
over
of private companies.
Yeah.
That are actually
lighter industry is still predisposed to like what looks like a private market, but like the stock market in China is not necessarily a real thing. It's just it's the function of like gambling for the most part. There's heavy there. I mean, stock market is gambling here as well, but you see what I mean. There's not even like any sort of fundamentals that that people rely on. Ultimately, socialism at its root means workers owning the means of production.
That it is. And what I was saying about China is, to a large extent, their big companies, there is a much heavier governmental control aspect to it. And there are 5-year plans. I completely agree with that.
They control capital flows.
But the big companies are private.
Yeah, but it's not. I like to describe what China's doing, which is only one.
I just asked you that because I'd like the one that you think is the best.
Yeah, I say that China wears capitalism like a sleeve, and at the end of the day, while there is a private enterprise inside of the state, which creates a system of competition for innovation, which fosters innovation, ultimately it's still controlled by the government, and it's at the directive of the government. There is like a lot more emphasis on centralized control, central planning, and central control over all of the outputs. They want to build more housing. They realize that housing needs to be built. They tell the banks, or they tell everyone that's paying attention, if you go into real estate, you're gonna get loans. You're gonna be able to build a real estate company, and then they build the housing, and then
but in
when
real
they want to
estate,
move in
fair,
the direction
Hasan,
of EVs,
that's been the real estate. They created this gigantic bubble. And in
but
fact,
how did
that's something that they've been lugging for the last.
See, this is what I mean about state control. They design it in a way that resembles what it would look like under capitalism, but then in the aftermath of that, they don't receive the same shocks. What happened in China as far as the real estate bubble, if it were to happen here in the United States of America, something similar to that had happened in the past. Yeah, exactly. We saw the impact of the 2008 housing market crash. In China, no such market crash took place. And the reason for that is because there's still state mechanisms at play that work in the recovery side. There's still state mechanisms at play that supersede the interests of capital. We gave a big parachute to corporations in the aftermath of the 2008 2008 financial crisis, the housing market crash. That didn't happen in China. One of the more prominent examples of this was, for example, they went to I forget the name of the company now, but they literally went and asset stripped the billionaire that was in charge of one of the major real estate developers, Evergrande, I believe it was.
It was
Where
Evergrande.
Yeah, where they told him, you're selling your yacht, you're selling all of your artwork in order to put up collateral for the state, paying out the rest of the people.
Let me say this. If there was an example of failed financial policy in the United States, it was the way we handled the 2008 crash. Because there's no doubt that what you're saying, that there was no retribution, there was no penalty to the people running those big financial institutions, is absolutely true. And it was absolutely wrong. And the question, and to me, it's like you were saying, the issue that we're having is that the big corporations, in effect, are controlling the government. In effect, they were controlling the government.
Yeah.
And in fact, now they're, have a government guarantee on a private corporation, which means they get to, I agree with that. And so to me, I actually think Deng Xiaoping is a huge hero because the changes that he instituted in China led to the biggest move of poor people into the middle class in the history of the world by far.
Yeah,
and
1 billion people taken out of poverty, pretty much 800
is
million people.
Absolutely amazing. But to me, that was what I'm trying to say, which is this.
But the state control didn't go away.
I understand that. But what I'm trying to say is this. He tried to design the incentives to let the Chinese people build them. I mean, I don't think he built them out. He gave them a framework to build themselves out. And they did an amazing job. And I think to me, he's a hero of somebody who could, you're saying, yes, he kept the government in control. And I'm saying, well, here the problem is, I agree with you. The government is being controlled by interests.
Yes. In America, capital controls the government. In China, the government controls capital. That's the major difference here.
And there's I agree with that.
Even though one might say there isn't like a democratic process where they're like voting exactly, like input, output, voting exactly which way the government is supposed to be, which direction the government is supposed to be moving, even in their own internal appointment process, like people are working from the working class background, working in the countryside before they get to the standing committee or anywhere near the command structure within the party. So they've developed a deeper understanding of like what the necessities are and how to materially improve people's living conditions, and the results speak for themselves.
But let me say this. There's been a profound change in China under Xi Jinping. This is very far from California, but it's actually, but what I'm saying is this.
Do you not like the changes that have been implemented under Xi Jinping?
Well, here's the thing I dislike the most is he's president for life. Always before, the leader had 2 5-year terms. Mm-hmm. And there was a sense that it was a much broader coalition of people running the country and a much broader group. It's still the Chinese Communist Party running the country, but people absolutely took their terms. And he's the first person who said, no, I'm doing this forever. And it's now me. And I think that has Hasan, that's a big difference.
No, I agree.
It's just, difference.
People seem to be happy with the results so far. And I feel like it's entirely in the hands of them continuing to bring about changes that people are appreciative.
Well, let me say this, that if the president of the United States says, which many people suspect him of saying is, up until now there's been a constitutional amendment that says it's 2 terms per president and I'm now president for life. Am I going to be happy about that? I'm going to go with no.
If Donald Trump was a communist, I wouldn't have an issue with it, I'll be honest. If Donald Trump was able to improve people's living standards to the same degree, or if Donald Trump was able to bring about like national prosperity to a similar degree, it's like the FDR equation. I wish I wish there was a better line of succession for FDR, I guess, but FDR was able to change the trajectory of America with all of the incredibly popular things he put in place.
I completely agree with you. And I think that what he did was redefine the relationship between government and people. And, he said, we have a real responsibility to each other, and this government is going to make sure that we do this, and it's not, kind of free for all. It's not an open competition. In fact,
Yeah.
everybody has rights.
In any case, so that's one of the reasons why I'm not even defending the term limit structure within the term limits changes under Xi Jinping. It's not something that I care about all that much. But what are some of the structural changes that he made as far as like his governance or his economic policies that you disagree with?
Well, it is more about governance, that he has very much cleared out everybody who doesn't report to him. And it's very much gone from, a broad-based group to basically, his control and making sure that people report to him. And that's been a consistent policy over the last 10 years. And the reason I care about that is it scares me. It scares me that a person, you may like their system, and I think it's been incredibly successful. So yes, I hear you, and I'm someone who's saying I change my mind when the facts change, or when the facts are clear. But the one thing that I think is also clear is that when you get into a situation of someone taking control, the idea that doesn't change them.
It does.
Always changes.
Certainly. As far as Xi Jinping goes, it's actually the opposite of the way that is presented in Western news. He has been his main structural change in China was to somehow rein back in a lot of the corruption that had come from, Dengist reforms that were very helpful initially in terms of, developing Chinese prosperity. And not only that, but he's also literally purged the ranks of some of his closest allies as well, including the ones in the military. So
famously just fired the head.
Yeah. So the way that it is a lot of stuff is interpreted in the Western media is very different. This is beyond the term limits, of course. The term limits thing you do have a decent point on, but as far as what he has done in terms of anti-corruption has been very popular in China.
Let me say this: I don't think we're going to a permanent governor of California.
No,
and I don't think we're.
Yeah, we don't.
And
we
I
don't
think
need to keep talking
the
about it.
other thing that's true is
wondering what your
when we
assessment
think
is.
about where we're going, we're starting from a place. We're not starting from scratch. We're starting from here.
Yeah.
And so when we think about change, it's like we don't have a blank slate. In the state of California, you have a couple hundred years at least of history and a couple hundred years of expectations and institutions that are built here. So when we think about change, we, believe it or not, introducing competition into the electric system is structural change. Yeah. Talking about single-payer healthcare is structural change. All the things I'm talking about, to a large extent, are, we have a short-term problem, but we need structural change in the long run. But the idea that we're going to get away with the system that's been here whole hog, in one fell swoop is, I just don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen either. I believe in a system of reforms and building a robust base of pressure.
Agreed.
Through organized labor,
that is what I'm trying to do.
Labor, through years and years of organizing until it gets to a point where there are workers' councils and there's a lot more autonomy for the working class that they can actually have the political education, the political will, and be able to make these sorts of decisions that benefit them as opposed to benefit the capital owning class. But before we get there, we were talking about monopolies.
Yes.
There is, by the time, if you were elected in office, the Paramount, Skydance, Warner Brothers Discovery merger would be come across your desk. What would you do as a governor to tackle this very obvious, monopolistic merger?
And it's worse than that, because obviously, one of the things.
What are you going to do about Ellison's?
I was about to say that was my point to you.
Yeah.
It's like you're talking about this just in terms of the number of jobs that are going to be destroyed by this, the reduction in the quality of entertainment, and how bad this is for Los Angeles, California. All true.
Yeah.
But that's not all that's bad about this. Obviously, what we're seeing is I don't want to use the term all the time oligarchs, but let's just use the term oligarchs. They're trying to buy all the means of communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're buying.
They already have.
Pretty. It's not true that they've bought all of them, but Trump is trying to intimidate every of the other ones by threatening to sue them for gigantic bucks and do all these things that he can do to punish them if they actually try to tell the
No,
truth.
I just meant every single one of these organs of media.
They're trying to buy and shut down.
Or entire social media platforms
Yes.
owned by a billionaire.
I'm agreeing. And I'm saying they're trying to not just to impact the democracy. Now they want to control the democracy, and they want to do it in multiple ways. But one of the ways is by buying all the means of communication so that what people hear is by definition slanted. And do I think that the Ellisons will do that? Yes. I think that that's a big part of what this is about. So we should talk about jobs, but we should also talk about communications, because if people only hear the big lie, then they have what else are they going to believe?
Yeah.
And that's very much what's going on here. So to a large extent, if you're the governor of California, can you undo a merger? No. What can you do? What you can do.
Well, the Attorney General of California actually said that they were going to try to stop it. So I think there are some ways. I mean, it's not under your control, I guess, but there are some antitrust initiatives that the state attorney general could potentially implement.
I'm sure they can try. But Hasan, I can tell you, I've watched hundreds of mergers go down, and I've never seen it get stopped by a state.
Have you thought about building a coalition with other states as well, if necessary?
I mean, so I haven't, because it is honestly about California to a very large extent. This is very much a merger between California, about California companies. Mm-hmm. What I would say is, I would put this in a slightly different context, if you don't mind. And that's this. We are having a profound, dramatic, intense difference of opinion about everything with this administration in Washington, D.C. This is obviously an antitrust problem. Mm-hmm. It's overwhelmingly an antitrust problem. And that would be a very straightforward, untraditional antitrust law to say shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
It is clear that this president improperly is influencing what's happening here and is pushing it really hard. It is clear that he is happy to punish California. All the things we're saying are bad are bad. And the fact that they're bad, he considers them to be good. And so to a very large extent, what we're seeing is he is trying to punish California. And that is going on in multiple venues all the time and will get much worse as the election approaches in November. And so I don't mean to not answer your question about this merger, but to a very large extent, somehow California has to have ability to push back, to be organized and push back on this. Yes, we can sue everywhere, and of course we should sue everywhere. I get that. And, Rob Bonta is a good attorney general, and he will sue, and I'm sure he will continue to sue. But you have noticed that when the Supreme Court said no tariffs, Trump's answer was, okay, no tariffs, here's my answer, tariffs.
Yeah.
He's not someone who obeys the law. So but the question is, how are we actually going to make our case? How are we actually going to back this guy off? How are we actually going to support? And to me, that is about organization. That is about working with organized labor. That is about feet on the street. And it's also a vision of something different. Because the real way, the last time we saw a corrupt, violent government suppression of people just living their American lives was the civil rights movement. And they did not, the way they backed them off, yes, there were legal things, but to a very large extent, it was about being organized, being in the street, having a different vision, and showing the world the difference between right and wrong.
There's also there was an armed vanguard component to what we're talking about as well that certainly played a role in this pressure, in this pressure campaign. Yes. The Black Panther Party. I mean, the state of California, as a matter of fact, under Ronald Reagan, was the I think last time that Ronald Reagan took action against of gun ownership, the Mulford Act, if I'm remembering it correctly, after the Black Panther Party protested using their legal right to demonstrate with their arms, but. It's everyone plays a different role in stuff like this. I do want to ask you about ICE.
Okay.
So when you were a hedge fund manager, your firm invested $90 million in private prisons and detention centers. And I want to know how that aligns with your current stance on ICE, because from what I understand, you're in favor of ICE abolition.
So that happened 22 years ago, and it was a big mistake. And I realized it was a big mistake and sold it over 20 years ago.
Okay.
And the reason I sold it was for the reason you're saying. And it was more than a mistake. And it was this. It was a wake-up call that I was in the wrong place. I mean, people wonder, why did you walk away from a big business that you'd started that was worth a ton of money? And the answer is, because it didn't align with my values.
Okay.
And so if you look at the last 20 years, and that was a real wake-up call, you know, we have pushed on every justice-related thing about incarceration and the justice system itself for the last 20 years. We have a group of 20 people in Sacramento, and we have pushed on every one of those. And in fact, I think that I am endorsed by Smart Justice, which is a very much about rehabilitative justice organization. And so, you know, my wife spent 10 years going into San Quentin. My mom taught in prison. It was a mistake, but it also was a chance for it. Absolutely is a wake-up call. I mean, you're sitting here saying, and I hear you, Hasan, the capitalist system has real contradictions and problems in there. And that's really why I walked away from my business, was I felt like this is taking me to places that are absolutely antithetical to what I believe in. And that's why I did it. And that's why I spent the last 14 years working on this.
What are some of the other avenues that you felt like was deeply unethical? Also, I'm asking you these questions that come across like tough questions, but I want you to
No. I always say to people, there are no tough questions.
Yeah.
There are people who don't have good answers.
Yeah, I also think that it's important to understand the like moral or intellectual journey that you went through to
I
come
have
to
to
these
have gone to some.
conclusions.
I have, you know, the story of Paul on the road to Damascus. He's the biggest antichrist person, and he realized I made a huge mistake, and he becomes the biggest pro-Christ person on the road to Damascus. And it's like he made a change.
Jesus Christ is the socialist in this equation. Is that what you're saying? Okay.
But I'm saying justice is, and I will say this, you know, I felt like, and I'll give you a perfect example. People are always saying to me, you know, you've spent a ton of time in environmentalism, but your firm had invested in fossil fuels. And the answer is, sure. Everybody invested in fossil fuels. It's a huge part of the economy. We invested less than our share, but we invested in fossil fuels. And I decided I can't invest in fossil fuels. We need to divest. We need to get out of all these things. And I felt like I can't change, even though I started that firm, I couldn't change that firm's culture because that was not what people were there for. And so I very much had to leave and, you know, basically go and work on the things that I cared about. And I've spent, you know, I could go into immense detail to you about how I think about energy and how I think we're going to actually do it in a clean way and what it's going to take as governor to make that happen and why it's such a powerful role. And that's true. But I was coming from a place that was completely different, and I had to make a change.
Speaking of divestments, there was a question that was asked about boycott, divestments, and sanctions to all of the candidates, and the way I see it.
Last question.
Okay. All right. Oh, this is the last question.
Are we running out of time?
Yeah, and the way I see it is that this is a way for candidates to certainly show how earnest they are to the broadest subsects of the population, much like the billionaires tax or any kind of initiative that takes away wealth from billionaires with redistributive policies. Both in the Democratic Party's base of support, there's like 80% approval, not for BDS necessarily, but a way to decouple from Israel. What are your opinions on that issue?
Well, what I said was I don't believe in divestment. But what I also said is
You do believe in divestment for some stuff, though, like the private prisons.
I believe, well, let me say this. I believe in my operating in divesting from everything doesn't have a positive impact, to be honest. What I was saying is they were talking about CalPERS and CalSTRS, and they're going to run their operation. And I don't believe that we can tell them exactly how to do that. But let me say this about Israel in general. What I said in that same forum was, I have huge problems with the government of Israel. And what we've seen is a continuing, you know, look, I'm someone who believes there's a huge problem in the Middle East. And I'm so old-fashioned, the only thing I believe in is a two-state solution, that everybody has a right to self-determination, and that if the state of Israel is trying to, if the government of Israel is trying to make sure that there is no two-state solution, which has been the approach for a long time, that is going against the only thing that I think could possibly solve this, and the only just way that we can possibly solve this. And so what we're seeing is a very long program to make sure that that's impossible. Now, I don't believe that is impossible, but that's been the approach of this government for a very long period of time. And so do I think that that's okay? No, I don't think that's okay. I have a huge problem with it.
Benjamin Netanyahu has been in charge of Israel for longer than Xi Jinping has been in charge of China.
And that has been the entire drift of that whole thing. And so what we've seen, what we're seeing is there a way for us to push back on that? As the government of the United States, of course there is. I mean,
there's some ways in the state of California, it's a very powerful economy. It's it's the fourth largest economy in the world. I think that even attempts or moving in that direction, which would be certainly something that is unheard of and would definitely cause you to cut away from from the other candidates that you are going up against, from Eric Swalwell to all these other candidates.
Well, let me say this. One of the things I've been talking about is getting rid of PAC money. And the reason I'm against PAC money is I feel like any organization that is trying to push the state of California, except in the interest of its citizens, why should we allow that?
Mm-hmm.
And so to a large extent, what I've been talking about is corporate PACs, because I said to you, every time we see something corrupt, at the back of it is some corporate interest that has power, and it has power through lobbying, has power through money, and they want the system to be bent in their favor, and they're successful in it because it's so expensive to run in this state.
So you're saying APAC is what, or JPAC, I think, in the state of California.
I don't know, but what I'm saying is the idea that we would have a PAC who is trying to push California in the interest of a foreign country, I don't understand how that could possibly make sense.
I mean, there have been some initiatives taken that Gavin Newsom actually signed into law about, like, the education of the issue of Israel-Palestine that would go against all the academic literature on the subject matter. Is there any initiative that you think you could take as the governor that would change the trajectory of, like, things like AB 715, for example? Or are you in support of things like that?
Well, what I am in support of is actually us speaking up on this issue and actually pushing back against the idea that there can be money in our politics that is supporting anything except the interests of the people of California. And that is something that I have said publicly we should ban. And that is a huge change. And that is the one that I think is at the heart of so much of this stuff. And that is something I would, to me, you're saying what is different? That's very different.
So you think you have a difference in your interpretation on this issue in comparison to someone like Eric Swalwell?
I do.
Well,
first of all, I'm not taking money.
Yeah.
So that's a huge difference, because one of the things I'm saying is, look, I'm not taking money from any of these people. That's why I can be an honest broker. That's why I can stand up for the people of California. And in this issue, I'm saying, look, I don't think this money shouldn't. I've said I don't want corporate PAC money. I don't think there should be PAC money from a country. It doesn't make sense to me.
Mm-hmm. But that's across the board, and that's understandable. I mean, you're a billionaire. I'm also in favor of removing corporate donations and corporate PACs in general from all elections. I think that it's undemocratic. It's an undemocratic system, regardless. But the reason why I'm asking you about this specifically is because this is the one area where, with the exception of some of the other candidates like Butch Ware who are not really
no one is talking. No one's really standing up on this issue.
Yes, this is not and I know for a fact that while California has a lot of wealthy donors who are very much invested in the continued state of Israel behaving in the ways that it does, as far as, like, the broad base of support goes, I've been out there. And there's, approval ratings that also suggested, like, the overwhelming majority of not only just the Democratic Party's base of support, but just, like, all Californians in general.
Look, I think what we've seen, Hasan, there's no question. What has gone on as a result of Gaza is a complete walking away from supporting this Israeli government. Oh, I think that's overwhelmingly obvious. There was a huge article about it last week on Friday. They released a poll which made that extremely clear, because what people have seen
Americans
online is something that
yeah.
people cannot support. And what I'm saying is, look, the way that this works in my mind, when we see something in our system that seems as if it's going against the interest that people overwhelmingly hold, there's usually money in back of it, and that is the right way to approach it. That's the right way to attack it, because that's what's corrupting our system.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is in some ways a deflectionary mechanism that some Democratic politicians have deployed, including Gavin Newsom, that says, I will never take AIPAC money.
Is that true? He's never taken AIPAC money?
He's given $500 to AIPAC back in the day, but he's never taken, he's saying he won't commit to taking AIPAC money. I think in the state of California, it's not AIPAC, it's JPAC anyway, but regardless, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when asked, he says, I don't want to take AIPAC money. But when asked directly by Ben Shapiro if Israel was committing a genocide, he deflected and refused to answer that question. And I think for a lot of people, and I talked to a lot of candidates, I talked to a lot of Democrats, I talked to independent candidates, this question is one that the majorities are in agreement with, historians, academics, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, and yet it's one.
I don't think there's any question. Americans have seen war crimes on their phones, and that's what they're responding to. And what we're seeing is a move in this world, including in the last 3 days, that might makes right. And that's all that's going to matter. And that's what's going on. You know, I don't think anybody's really feels sorry for the people who were running Iran, because they were terrible to their own people. But the truth is, what we're seeing is a world where the point is, might makes right, and we'll do whatever we want. And if you don't like it, that's just too bad. And there's no sense of justice in it. And of course, that is a terrible step. And we've seen it in Gaza, but we've seen it very broadly. And that's something that's ongoing. And is that something which, of course, I'm completely opposed to? Of course, I'm completely opposed to that.
Okay, so that's almost identical to what I don't mean to. I don't mean to push you, but that's almost identical to what Gavin Newsom said to Ben Shapiro when Ben Shapiro said, "Do you think there's a genocide going on in Gaza?"
What I think is this: I think that this Israeli government has been trying to take over the entire country and expel the Palestinians and take over the whole thing, kit and caboodle. And that's what they've been doing for a long time. It's absolutely wrong. There's no question there. And they're willing to commit war crimes to do it. That's what I think. And that's been going on for a long time.
So you don't want to you're not committing to the term genocide.
I don't actually, I think, you tell me if this is what it means, because it's sort of like socialism, if you excuse my saying so.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think they're trying to kill all the Palestinians? No.
No,
I think I don't. I think they're trying to expel the Palestinians from the country, that they're trying to have one state.
That would be genocidal intent.
I don't know what that is, but that's what they're trying to do.
That is a genocidal intent.
They're clearly trying to take over the West Bank. They're clearly trying to take over Gaza. They're willing to, go to extreme, merciless lengths in order to do that. Hasan, that's what there's a history that's 10 years of doing that.
Well, it's longer than 10 years.
Well, whatever. Yes,
started off with ethnic cleansing in 1948,
but that's what's going on. I don't know I honestly don't know what genocide means, but what I do know is they are trying to end up controlling the whole state. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So okay, I mean that is what, at least according to the Holocaust scholars, genocide scholars.
Do I think they're trying to kill all the Palestinians? No.
No.
I think they're trying to expel them from the country.
Yes, it's still an ethnic cleansing and indicative of genocidal intent, which is why that's the whole the International Court of Justice case that's about that. But that is what it is. Yeah, you can do it in part as well, similar to what took place in Bosnia and Kosovo, and
Well,
that's,
and I look at that and I say the exact same thing. How did they actually end all the fighting in Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia?
they bombed the crap out of Yugoslavia.
But
America
they
did.
also gave everybody their own territory and their right of self-determination. And that's
Yeah.
what's got to happen here.
I think it might have been better if Yugoslavia stayed intact, but that's that's neither here nor there.
But it didn't happen. And it did solve the problem. They're no longer killing each other.
Yeah. But again, there was a lot of bombing in this place. But anyway, Tom, thank you so much for
Hasan,
coming on.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And where can people find your campaign? If you want to
TomSteyer. What is it, you guys? Yeah, that's what I was going to say. TomSteyer.com. I never logged on to it.
TomSteyer.com.
Yes.
All
And
right.
can I say one more thing, Hasan?
Yeah.
I think I am the practical progressive in this race who can actually make the changes that you want. And am I going to use all the language that you want? Maybe not. But am I going to try and make the changes that you actually want? I think so. I really do. And I think that working people have been screwed and they need someone who will fight with them. And they need someone who's not going to owe anybody else anything and who's going to stand up and do the right thing. And that is me.
All right. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
All right.